It's week 4 in the NFL, which means fantasy football season is well underway. And look, folks, championships are not won at the draft. They're won through roster management, wins and losses each week. What guys are you playing? Who are you fading? Who's in and out of the lineup? And injuries play a massive role in roster management. So let's get you prepared for NFL Week 4 with our weekly injury report. Welcome, football fans, to another edition of IDP Plus. What is up, folks? I'm your host here at the DGen Doc, and that's right, it is the NFL Week 4 Injury Report time. As always, you might hear some people talking injuries, this and that, but this is for my IDP folks. This is for the defensive side of the ball. We are going to let you guys get some shine here, and we're going to be talking mostly defensive players today. That's what the show's main focus is, IDP Injury Report. We're going to go some in-depth look at, hey, who are some guys maybe questionable this week, who's out, who's in type deal. It is Thursday. We've got some decent amount of data here. And then, yes, for my offensive people, I do an offensive rundown. Because if you're playing IDP, there's a good chance you're also playing normal fantasy football. So I will talk about offense not nearly as in depth because we are giving the defense some light finally, as the NFL needs to deal with all these penalties and rule changes they're doing. But yeah, that's the main focus of the show here. I'll be doing this each week. So you guys have been tuning in, liking it. No request to change the format, so I'm going to keep rolling. Again, if you do have something, just reach out to me either on X at the DGen Doc or just leave a comment under this video. Let me know if you have any more questions about specific guys. Trying to hit all the big names here, but there's a lot of players in the NFL. So without further ado, let's hop in here with the biggest news. And, it's not as much question, is he going to play this week, even this season? But unfortunately, San Francisco 49ers stud defensive end, Nick Bosa, ACL tear. At this time, you've probably heard he got hurt and gave the thumbs down to probably his family or somebody in the stands there from the sidelines. Probably could start preparing you for not a great thing. Wasn't able to come back in the game. ACL tear is going to be out for the season. Typically a 10 to 12 month recovery timeline. If I think he's getting the reconstruction tomorrow, Friday. If it's a clean tear and just the ACL, probably can be back closer to 10 months. Week 1 next year, is it realistic? If it's something further, like we're seeing with Brandon Aiyuk, ACL plus, maybe MCL, some nerve damage, could be up to a year. So still got to wait and see after the report how he's progressing. But obviously for this season, Nick Bosa is done there. The ACL, anterior cruciate ligament, if we look here on the left, that first ligament in between the two, the one that's at the center coming anterior to the front there. So that is completely torn, requires surgery. So no more Nick Bosa this season, unfortunately. Another guy who's going to miss some time, New York Jets linebacker Quincy Williams has been put on the IR with a shoulder injury. Now, some injuries we get all the information, some we only get little breadcrumbs, and this is a breadcrumbs one here. Just saying a shoulder injury. Now, they did say the expectation is it's the short-term IR. So as opposed to Bosa, who was put on, injured reserve for the season, he's out for the year. This is short-term IR, so he has a chance to come back within the next 4 weeks, right? Or excuse me, past 4 weeks. So he's going to miss at least 4 weeks, 4 games there. Well, really, it's just 4 weeks because bye weeks included in that. He's going to miss at least 4 weeks, but they're expecting him to return at some point this season. Again, since we don't really have specifics, I don't really want to speculate too much. Maybe they'll give specifics at certain points. Some teams are more forthcoming with injury infos and some just do the bare minimum of what they have to do. So hard to really project. Obviously, you're going to expect him out for at least 4 weeks. And then from there, we want to see if we get either more information or how he's ramping up to practice. Good news is he's expected to be back this season. But again, for us fantasy managers, is that going to be week 9 or is that going to be week 14, 15 where he's basically irrelevant to our fantasy football picture? Still up in the air there. Now, another guy who is going to be out this week but has a chance to return potentially next week, Pittsburgh Steelers linebacker, outside linebacker, edge rusher, Alex Highsmith. Mike Tomlin makes this nice and easy when he does his injury stuff. He was already ruled out, I think, on Monday or Tuesday. He's kind of a no BS guy. If the guy's going to play, he says he'll have a shot. If he's not going to play, he's out. So Highsmith, I think this is only week 2 off of his high ankle sprain that he suffered. So not surprised. Typically, they take 4 to 6 weeks, even in the mild cases, to recover completely. Now, they didn't put him on the IR, which tells me that they think he could return possibly in the 3rd week, which would be next week. So there is a chance we would expect Highsmith to play next week. However, not a guarantee, and he has not practiced to this point, including today. So I think, no, won't be out there for the Dublin game, but next week, if he starts to, he's got to be able to get back to practice and ramp up. There's a chance, not a guarantee. I still wouldn't really trust him to throw him in my lineup yet, but I think, 2 weeks from now is where we start having that conversation. But Highsmith will be out. Spoke about his injury on a previous episode, but when we talk about ankle sprains, we typically think of an inversion sprain when we hear an ankle sprain, rolling your ankle playing basketball or pickleball for you folks that enjoy that or something like that, right? Roll it, it hurts, but typically you can get back out there in a week or two. The high ankle sprain is different. It's not to the traditional ankle. It's to what we call the syndesmosis between your bones, your 2 lower leg bones, your tibia and your fibula. And they are kind of like a mesh netting. They're a lot harder to damage, which means that it requires more force, which also means it takes more time to recover. So it's a pretty nasty injury. Again, even in mild cases like Alex Highsmith here, 4 to 6 weeks for a full recovery. If they're worse, something like a Mark Andrews from a couple years ago, you can have the fibula actually break, and it can be a 2 to 3 month thing. So still wasn't the worst case here, but tough injury to deal with during the season. All right, let's keep moving along here. We've got Colts cornerback Kenny Moore dealing with a calf strain. What's a calf strain? Essentially just damage to your muscle, to the calf muscle. You have 2 of them. You got your gastrocs on top, your soleus underneath. Typically, when they say calf, they talk about the gastrocnemius muscle. Different grades here. Grade 1 is something mild. Grade 2 is moderate damage. And grade 3 is a full tear. Well, we know it's not a full tear. A full tear would, require surgery, would be out for a long time. And that's not the case here, at least if it was a full tear to the tendon. But it would be pretty much season ending. Not the case. They're expecting this to be a multi-week injury, to be out 2 to 3 weeks, though. So probably closer to our grade 2 moderate range, where it could be kind of that 3 to 6, depending on the amount of damage, how many weeks they're going to come back. So kind of a lower scale grade 2, maybe a high grade 1. Grade 1 is typically 1 to 2 weeks missed. Grade 2 is kind of more that 3 to 6 weeks, but it is kind of a spectrum sliding scale. It's not just, hey, the body knows it's grade 1, grade 2. It's really just what percentage of the muscle was damaged. So this kind of tells me, all right, we're kind of in that low grade 2 area for Kenny Moore. Obviously having a great season like all the Indianapolis Colts seem to be having. Defense has been stellar, top 10. But this is a loss. This is a loss for them in that typically that slot cornerback position. They did sign Mike Hilton, who he's a veteran. He's experienced, but he's on the streets for a reason. So it might be a viable fill-in for the defense, but not sure if it's a guy I'm running to pick up off on the waiver wire there. So maybe just wanting to pivot from that point. But Kenny Moore expected to be out 2 to 3 weeks. Obviously going to be out this week. All right, let's continue with the cornerback position. Let's talk about some teammates here playing in Sunday Night Football. That's for the Cowboys. Trevon Diggs and Daron Bland. Now, Daron Bland has missed the past 2 weeks with the foot injury he suffered in practice after the Eagles game in week 1. And now he seems to be back. He practiced yesterday, with a limited participation, and then he was a full participation today. And he was kind of the one we would expect to be able to, all the reports were saying kind of expecting to play this week. Now, his running mate, Trevon Diggs, who dealt with the cartilage and knee injuries kind of his whole career, but definitely this offseason. And then he got knocked out of the game last week and did not practice yesterday. So things were looking a little bit doom and gloom for Diggs, but he popped up with a full practice today. So bit of a surprise there, usually at least a limited, then a full, but they're clearly saying he's good enough to go. So great news for the Cowboys and for fantasy managers. It sounds like both Diggs and Bland practicing on a Thursday fully means typically there's a very, very good chance they're both going to be out there. So Cowboys getting some help in the secondary that has been awful. The number 1 defense as far as pass yards allowed in the worst possible way. So let's say the number 32 ranked defense, right? The worst possible pass defense at this point. So getting your starters back obviously helps to turn that page. I don't think it's going to fix everything, especially these guys coming off injury, but it definitely should look better than what we saw these past couple weeks. Now, sticking to the defensive backfield, this is a new injury here with Houston Texans star cornerback, stud all-pro, Derek Stingley. He's got an oblique injury. Your obliques are the abdominal muscles on your side. So not your six-pack muscles, not your typical what you call rectus abdominis muscles in the six-pack, eight-pack, whatever it is, things that I don't have. We're talking the obliques, and they are more rotationary. Deal with rotation, right? So rotary forces, right? Geez. And they're on the sides here. So any turning, twisting, catching, pivoting, cutting, things like that, it's going to be painful. 2 straight DMPs, has not practiced yet this week, so that's not a good sign. Obviously, one of your biggest assets on your defense, if not your best player. You're playing the Titans. You're at home. You're 7-point home favorites. I don't think they need to push it, and I would advise them probably not to. That's probably what the medical staff is telling D'Amico Ryans. Now, we'll see. If he practices tomorrow, there is a chance with it. They called him day-to-day, which tells me it's not a huge injury, but things are trending like he's going to be out, and I think that's a smart play for the future. Obviously, it doesn't help you this week, but you would not want him to be rushed out there, suffer a re-injury, and now we're talking months instead of a week or something like that. So, tough to expect Stingley to be in this week. I would expect him out at this point with 2 straight non-practices, but this is not expected to be a long-term injury. So somebody who should be back hopefully next week, if not the week after. All right, now we've got some more serious injury, and that is safety Will Harris for the Washington Commandos there. He has a fractured fibula. What's your fibula? It's one of your 2 lower leg bones. You get your tibia is the big one, and then your fibula is the smaller one there. I was kind of talking about a little bit where when the high ankle sprains, if they're bad enough, sometimes that fibula can fracture. That wasn't really the case here. It was more of just a traumatic type injury to Will Harris. But when we talk about bones, they need time to heal. It's one of those things that you can't really rush too much, typically at least 2 months, if not closer to 3 months. So at this point, he's expected out indefinitely, which tells me potentially the season. Now, maybe late in the season, if the Commanders are making a playoff run, he's able to come back out there. But for fantasy purposes, I would say that you're good to, if you have him, probably go ahead and drop him. He's probably not going to play at all in the fantasy season. And if he does, he'd be just coming back and rusty. It's not really someone I want to be trusting in my fantasy football playoffs there for IDP. So Will Harris, with that fibular fracture, again, it's not something you really can rush. It's not something you want to rush. So expect him out for the fantasy season, if not the entire regular season. Now we're going to talk about a group of injuries that always kind of give me the heebie-jeebies, and that is the neck injuries in the NFL. We've kind of seen them, whether it's been the Peyton Manning where he had surgery and couldn't really move his neck and kind of looked like a shell of himself, or the guys like Chris Carson who've had career-altering injuries where they get a neck injury and then they don't play down to football again. We're having a similar situation there with Zach Moss in Cincinnati when he got cut with the neck thing. So now we got 2 guys here who it does not seem as that bad, at least one of them, but there's always a reason for pause when we talk about necks and football. When we think about what football players have to do, the neck is involved, especially on the offensive and defensive line, the line of scrimmage, which is where we're talking about here, 2 defensive linemen. We're going to start with the Baltimore Ravens defensive tackle, stud defensive tackle. I think very underrated, one of the best players. As IDP fans, you probably understand more than most casual NFL fans. Nnamdi Matabuike, absolute stud for Baltimore. We saw what this defense looks like without him. I mean, the Lions ran all over them. They were doing whatever they wanted at the line of scrimmage. Now, Kyle Van Noy is also out, but interior, Matabuike is a huge player, not just stuffing the run, but he has great interior pressure. A guy you would love to have versus Patrick Mahomes this week, because Patrick Mahomes, like most quarterbacks, if you get pressure from the inside, that's really a way to stymie him, a la Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis in the Super Bowl last year. Matabuike is going to be out, at least for this week. He was out last week, and Harbaugh gave a kind of ominous, like, hey, is this a long-term thing? And he basically said he wasn't allowed to say. He wasn't cleared, or maybe there's just not a clear picture, which is never what you want to hear. The muddier the picture, the more potential for a long-term type of complication, structural thing here. So when we talk about neck injuries, obviously this is a very crude picture, but you have the spine, you have muscles, you have nerves, you have arteries, you have all these different things running through there, not a lot of space. So when we have some type of irritation or aggravation, something you really kind of want to press pause, especially on the football field. This contact that every time that they're at the line of scrimmage, like your neck is involved. That's why it's one of the only athletes that kind of do the neck exercises. Those big, thick necks is important for football players. So this one kind of is concerning to me. He's not practicing at all yet. Still hasn't returned to practice. So there's been 2 weeks of no practice. The head coach is not really given any type of concrete update. Gonna be out this week for sure, but man, this does not give me great feelings. I'm hoping, because he's such a great player, they didn't immediately put him on the IR. Hopefully he'll be back soon, but don't have a lot of confidence here that he's going to be, ready to go wheels up next week. But we'll see. One will definitely be monitoring. But man, I'm really hoping that for Matabuke and for the NFL's sake that he's back out here, because he really is a dominant player. Would be a great IDP player, but just to watch as a football fan. Another guy with a neck injury who's also a stat stuffer, one of the most, I think also underrated superstar, Andrew Van Ginkel for the Minnesota Vikings, outside linebacker. Also dealing with a neck injury. And this is one that's kind of like we haven't got a lot of clarity on what it exactly is. Is it more the stinger type, or, what's going on here? But 2 straight missed practices, not a good sign. They're obviously traveling to Dublin probably tomorrow, if not tonight. True question mark. I mean, no, it's not a great sign that he's not practicing, obviously. Maybe they're just allowing those muscles, maybe it's just a muscle type irritation thing. They're just trying to let things calm down. They haven't said a lot, and him not practicing and only playing 8 snaps, which, tells me he wasn't really healthy last week. He's been banged up. He's been on the injury report for other things too. I think he had a concussion. And he was coming back from a concussion and now immediately a neck injury. Not typically what you want to see. Actually, not what you want to see at all. But I think he played 8 snaps and had 2 sacks last week, if I saw that stat correctly. His Viking defense is incredible to watch Brian Flores be the maestro and kind of orchestrate things. But at this point, I would expect him to not be out there. And even if he was, to be very limited. I think they might want to play it safe with Van Ginkel. And if he is active, going to get very limited snaps, maybe only on pass rushing downs or things like that. But I would not be expecting a full workload at all for Van Ginkel if he's not going to be out there, period. So have a backup plan for him. All right, a couple more guys here. Some positive news. Love being able to share some positive news because I don't get that a ton in the injury world. But hamstring strain for Christian Gonzalez. We've talked about him, I think, every week because he's been such a big name and a big story here. So hamstring strain, just damage your hamstring muscle. Same grades like we were talking about with the calf strain. Grade 1 minor, very minimal hamstring muscle damage. Grade 2 more moderate. Grade 3 a full tear. We know it's not a full tear, right? But this is a guy who injured in the offseason and then had a setback and re-injured. So the expectation originally from this injury was he was going to be ready to go week 1. Obviously, that was not the case. Wasn't even ready to practice. So there was some type of setback, re-injury, which hamstring strains. That's why they're one of the most burdensome in the NFL is they have high re-injury rates, especially those first 2 weeks returning back to play. Because it's one of those things that it feels better before it's actually fully healed. As anyone who's dealt with a hamstring strain, you probably experienced this. Like, oh, I kind of feel good. And then you go to actually run or use the hamstring, which is sprinting, cutting, accelerating, explosive movements. Then you're like, oh boy, that does not feel right. And that's where we typically get a re-injury where there's more damage to an already damaged muscle. So now he started to practice last week. He was apparently close to playing last week against the Steelers. They ultimately did the smart thing and held him out. But now he's back to practice this week. It's only limited practices, 2 in a row. Would love to see a full practice for him, but all the reports are kind of saying he's ramping up and looking good and responding well. So would love to see a full practice from him tomorrow, but obviously everyone knows what Christian Gonzalez can do in a true shutdown manner. So, at this point, I'd say he's kind of between questionable and probable. Would love to see a full practice that would, signify he's really back. But kind of expecting him to be able to be out there. It's kind of one of those 65% chance he's going to be out there right now. We'll see what tomorrow brings. If it is a full practice, obviously that goes up to 90, 95. But he can shut down the wide receiver 1. They're going up against Carolina Panthers, not the most prolific offense. It's been Tet McMillan and a whole lot of nothing. So if you've got Gonzalez kind of shutting down McMillan, this Patriots defense might be able to get after Bryce Young and a Carolina Panthers offensive line that has 2 starters on the IR right now. So that could be huge for that game if you can get somebody to kind of, because without Gonzalez, this defense has been a mess, especially in the passing department. The pass defense has obviously missed their star cornerback. So if you can bring him back in there and solidify, especially on a guy like McMillan, I think you got to favor the Patriots in that one. And then finally, really, I don't like reporting this one because it sucks. But Nolan Smith, and obviously as a Giants fan, it's not like he's an Eagle type thing. No love lost for the Eagles. But Nolan Smith is a really good player who's been, hampered by injuries in his career. In the Super Bowl, he tore his triceps tendon completely, which is bad. Like, that you have to have surgery. There's kind of no other way to repair it. And he kept playing. He did in the first half, and he was like, there's no way I'm leaving the Super Bowl, and kept going out there and playing and being somewhat effective. So shout out to him for even doing that. Now, typically, 4 to 6 months is the recovery process. So he got the surgery in February and then had plenty of time. But he re-injured that same triceps that he tore. That is not a good sign at all. Obviously, at this point, we're 8 months, 9 months removed. You would expect this thing to be 100%, and it's clearly not. So he's put on the IR. He's going to be sat for at least 4 weeks, but this is a little bit troubling. Like, you've already fully torn that tendon. Now it's clearly still not holding. It's not able to withstand whatever forces he's putting through it. And when we talk about triceps, we're talking about extension, right? Pushing the guys, whether you're pushing the offensive lineman or you're trying to, rip through or whatever, as you're hand fighting, which is so important in the line of scrimmage. If that muscle is not obviously ready to handle that, that's a bad sign for long-term kind of outlook there. So hopefully it's just kind of a one-off and he's able to kind of rehab it and get it back to where it needs to be. But that's not a good sign for Nolan Smith there. So, Za'Darius Smith, Jalex Hunt, maybe Azeez Ojulari gets some run. Like, they're going to have to figure out some things because this is a defensive line that loves to be able to rotate. They already lost some of that depth to free agency. With Josh Sweat, with Milton Williams, a couple other guys there. Obviously, my cat makes her weekly appearance in the videos. But yeah, Nolan Smith going to be on the IR. Expect him out at least 4 weeks. I'd rather be closer to 6 weeks. They're talking about potentially after their bye, maybe week 10 or 11 or so, that he might be coming back. But a brutal injury to Smith there. All right, that is the defensive side of the ball. So if you're just IDP, you can go ahead and clog your ears or just turn it off because defense is done. I'm going to do a very quick offensive injury rundown. Again, not going to do it fully in depth. If you are an offensive guy more, I do a lot more on X at the DGen Doc. You can follow me there. But it's IDP Plus, so you're not going to get too much shine here, offense. So Cee Dee Lamb, wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys, high ankle sprain. He's going to be out at least 3 weeks. And again, with the same thing with Highsmith, even in mild cases, this is a 4 to 6 week injury. I know they were like, oh, he said he's going to play next week. And then they were like, oh, he's not going to go on the IR. Like, 4 to 6 weeks before he's 100%. At least out 3 weeks is what typically it is for a mild high ankle sprain. Mike Evans, hamstring strain. He's definitely going to be out this week. Thankfully, not as bad as last year where he missed half the season. But 2 to 3 weeks, expect him to be out. I would say 2 weeks for sure. That third week, just kind of start testing it out, see how it feels. More the milder variety. But again, as we talked about with Christian Gonzalez, you don't want to come back too soon and risk a re-injury here. Terry McLaurin, the 2 straight no practices with the quad strain. They're interestingly saying like you're getting different opinions on if he needs surgery or not, which tells me he's probably not close to being able to play. Because if you're considering surgery, like I think something just said that he's not needed surgery, but they don't know if he's going to play this week. Those are like 2 entirely different ends of the spectrum. No practice, obviously it's big enough where he's consulting surgeons. I would say there's a very, very low chance he's going to play. And if he does play, I would not trust him this week in my lineup. Justin Fields coming back from that concussion, a full practice today, which is a great sign. Expect him to be out there and wheels up Monday night against a bad Dolphins defense. Brandon Aiyuk, San Francisco wide receiver, ACL tear and plus MCL, potentially some nerve damage. GM John Lynch said today that he's not close to returning. Not a great sign. Already someone I've been fading, kind of was in the offseason say, it's going to be at least week 10 before he's going to be able to be anything a semblance of what he looked like. Now we might need to push that back to week 12 or on. So not great signs for Brandon Aiyuk. Tampa Bay land here down in the Tampa. Left tackle Tristan Wirfs, first full practice of the season. Expect him to be good to go. Chris Godwin had his first full practice of the season yesterday, and then was a DNP. But reading into the beat reporters there in Tampa, it sounds like this was part of a regular scheduled ramp up program where, hey, let's give him a day off and then let's see if he can ramp up again for Friday. So at this point, the expectation is both Tristan Wirfs and Chris Godwin play on Sunday against the Eagles, which they're missing offensive lineman and Mike Evans. So they need those guys back in the lineup. And then finally, Rams stud wide receiver Davante Adams dealing with the hamstring injury. He missed practice yesterday, and McVay said, hey, it's minor. I'm not expecting him to be out this week. And then he missed practice again today. So again, McVay said that he should still be out there Sunday, but a little bit of concern with 2 straight did not practice, but he did seem to finish that game against the Eagles. So typically when a guy finishes a game and then just comes in a little bit banged up, they usually play the week after. But again, hamstrings are tricky. You do not want to push it too much and run yourself into a worse injury. All right, folks, that is the NFL Week 4 injury report here. Again, mostly focused on defense as we do every week, and then I will do an offensive rundown. If a newer kind of series this year. So we've done the 4 weeks now. If you got any recommendations, feedback, hey, I like the format, I don't like the format, let me know. Any guys you have questions about, probably the best way to ask me is just reach out on X. Because I will be going on vacation actually tomorrow. So I will have my phone on me, but if you got specific questions about players, injury stuff, probably just reach out to me on X over at the DGen Doc. But if you want to leave a comment, I will do my best to try to comment back as well. All right, folks. Hey, appreciate the love. Any support, subscribe, anything like that. We've got you covered. NFL, football, all 365. If you're into betting on football, whether it be NFL, college, check out DFSG Plus there. Myself and my co-host Derek, we do a college and an NFL betting show every single week. But yeah, folks, we've got a ton of football content on the IDP Plus network. So we hope you stick around, and we hope you enjoy another beautiful week of the National Football League. From the DGen Doc here at IDP Plus, I am out of here.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.